Hi everyone. I wanted to do a video to share with you what happened in the hospital, but not what happened physically. I've already done a video about that, about the operation and what I felt like. But I want to share with you what happened to me spiritually and emotionally in the hospital. But before I get there, I just want to go back about a week before I started with the chemo. I did a sermon in our church, and the sermon was on seeking God's kingdom. And a part of the sermon was about how we always want the good things. We want God to bless us. We want His favor on us. We want Him to provide us with everything we need. But there are times when God actually allows suffering to happen. And as a part of the sermon, which I'll actually provide a link to the recording of the sermon in the description of the video, as a part of the sermon, I used the book of Job as an example. Now, for those of you who haven't read the book of Job, it's quite a beautiful, poetic book where Job goes through this great deal of suffering, and he doesn't understand why, because he feels that he's done nothing wrong. But in the book of Job, in chapter 38, there's a part of the book where God shows up. And God shows up to rebuke Job's friends and Job himself as well for saying things without understanding. So God actually rebukes them because they don't understand the bigger picture. Job's going through all the suffering, but there's a bigger picture at play here. It's not just what's happening to him. There's a bigger story here. And so often for us, when you're in that situation, which is something that I found out while I was in hospital, your situation seems so bad that you can't see beyond the next couple of minutes or the next couple of hours or the next day. But there's a bigger plan at work, and that's what chapter 38 in the book of Job says to me. So during my stay in hospital, it almost seemed like there was a spiritual battle going on with me. Now I've been involved with spiritual warfare, and to people who don't really know what it is or have never been involved, it's not something that's easy to explain. For most of us, the world that we live in is only physical. But there is, and there's always been, a spiritual element, and I think most of us are aware of it, but we try to avoid it as much as we can. But over the years, in the ministries that I've been involved in, I've come very much into contact with this sort of side of life. No, not only just in a spiritual sense, but very much in a physical sense. Just to give you some examples, I've been involved with occult ministry and with prison ministry, and there it's not just like a airy-fairy spiritual thing. It's actually a physical thing where you're actually talking to people and you're seeing these things happen physically in front of you. I've actually been in a prison jail cell with 3 demon-possessed women. I've sat about a meter away from somebody who I knew really wanted to reach out and strangle me. I've been physically attacked. I've spoken to and counseled serial rapists and murderers. So it's not just something that's out there, that's it's actually something that is physically a physical reality, no, not just a spiritual reality. Now, most people won't be involved with things like that, but it's something that I have really been called to, and something that I really actually love doing. So during all these situations, I've never actually felt personally vulnerable. I never felt that any of this was aimed at me. I always knew that there was a barrier in between me as a person and the situation that I was in. But that was quite different in the hospital. In the hospital, it felt like everything was aimed directly at me, and I felt that sort of barrier wasn't there anymore. I don't know if it was just me because of what I was going through, but it really felt like this was aimed at me personally, and I don't know, maybe it was. The one night especially, I think it was about 2 nights after I had the operation, and I couldn't sleep. I was in this spiritual place where everything seemed to be against me. I knew that there was spiritual things happening around me. I didn't feel that I was equipped to deal with them, but I did try and deal with them as best that I could, drawing on the years of what I've been through. But this night was especially difficult. I felt that I had been abandoned. I felt that there was nobody there to help me. I was on my own. But I also knew in the back of my mind that I wasn't. That you have this feeling of being alone, but knowing that you're not. I knew that there was other people that were in this with me, but I just couldn't feel it at the time. So this night was really not easy. It went very slowly, and I really felt that I was alone. And you know, when you in that sort of situation, you get all these thoughts that come up in your mind about why is this happening to me? Well, what have I done wrong? Why do I have to go through all of this? Why can't it just all be fixed and I'll be okay? But sometimes I think just like with Job, you actually have to go through these situations. God never actually promised for us to have everything we want. As a matter of fact, Jesus said that we will have trouble in this world. Unfortunately, most of us don't want that trouble. Well, none of us do. None of us actually want that trouble. We just want the good things. And that's a problem, because when you're faced with a situation where you don't have the good things, how are you going to handle it? And I think for the first time in my life, I was really confronted by this situation where I was not in control, that I couldn't do anything to change what I was going through. I couldn't help myself. And I think that maybe that's what was probably the scariest for me, that I like to be in control. I like to know what's happening. I like to know that everything's going to be all right. But in that situation, I just didn't. It just didn't feel like anything was going to be all right. Now, when I look back at it, I can see why it had to happen. But at the time, you just don't know. You can't see the wood from the trees. So getting through that, probably the first 10 days, 11, maybe first 12 days of being in hospital was really a constant battle for me. Battle against the pain, a spiritual battle, thinking probably constantly about Job and his situation and trying to compare it to mine, and then thinking, but Job went through so much more, and there's so many people who go through so much more than I did. And how do they handle that? Or what do you draw on when you're faced with that situation? Where do you go? And the thing that really struck me is that I went back to my faith. And that was the only place I could go. There was no one there to help me physically. But I had to go back to my faith and to my experience with God. And in those sort of situations, you don't always think clearly. So your experiences in the past are very important. Knowing that in the past God has brought you through something difficult, and drawing back on that again, because you forget about the way that you felt then, but you can always draw back on the memory of what happened. So I think just looking back at it, well, it's easy now to look back and to see what I had to go through gave me a new perspective on what it's like to struggle, what it's like to suffer and not to know what that tomorrow will be better. And maybe it's given me more of an empathy towards people who go through things like this, and people who go through way worse than I actually went through. And it's also given me a sense of that no matter what we go through, there is a bigger plan. There is something greater that's happening. And then we can either surrender, we can either lie down and give up, or we can embrace it. We can embrace that God has a bigger plan for us and for our experiences. And we don't always see that at the moment. And just coming back to that book of Job, chapter 38, when we see God coming down and speaking to Job, it's not just about him coming down to rebuke Job. It's about him coming down to tell him that I've heard you. I know what you've gone through. There's a song by Ghost Ship that I use in my sermon. And at the end of the song, they actually said that my God knelt down and answered me. And that's the whole point, that God is actually with you, even if it doesn't feel like it. And I suppose that's one of the things that I really learned during that time in hospital. That even though I felt alone, even though I felt that nobody could help me, that I actually wasn't. That there was this presence with me that carried me through that situation. And one of the things that really struck me is it wasn't just God being with me. We got so many messages and support from all over the world I've had people in America that were praying for me. I had people in Sudan, South Sudan, in Kenya, people from Ireland, people all over South Africa. And we've had so many people who were supporting us, and it really struck me afterwards that even though I felt alone, I was never, ever alone. There was always somebody, somewhere, that was lifting me and my family up in prayer. So I suppose that even when you feel like you're alone, you must know that you never are. And your situation doesn't matter how bleak it is, there's always a silver lining somewhere. So I hope this gives you a bit of insight on what I went through during my time in hospital. I will probably take some time to write some of it down, maybe get my thoughts in order at some stage. And if you have any comments or questions, please reach out to me, and I'll be quite happy to answer those. So, thank you very much for listening, and God bless.